I wasn't in love with him. I protected him. I was honest with him. I understood him. I loved him. I loved him. I loved him. But was I in love with him?
Well, why don't you come home with me? Come to Saltburn.
Look, I just gave you what you wanted!
You don't need to be told, do you? It's the end of everything.
There's a fundamental misunderstanding of the intention behind Saltburn. Most of the popular reviews around this movie are so negative not only towards the film itself, but also towards the director, Emerald Fennell. And I've fallen into this rabbit hole of angry reviews where many people seem to take this film as an affront to their entire existence. Many people claim that Saltburn is just a ripoff of other stories like The Talented Mr. Ripley or Brideshead Revisited, among others in a similar vein. With one review on YouTube, their thumbnail just being F Saltburn, as if the movie burned down their house or something. While it may not be everybody's cup of tea, Saltburn is a bit undeserving of that level of aggression. And it's not even my favorite film either. I've seen a lot of people say that Saltburn is an Eat the Rich film, and I've seen a lot more people saying that it's an Eat the Poor film, citing the director Emerald Fennell's privileged upbringing as justification, and that Saltburn was made for rich people as a cautionary tale of what happens when you befriend the poor.
The poor?
What?
Now, I can totally respect that people may not like the film for whatever reason. That's totally okay. But a review shouldn't solely be based on whether you liked it or not. I think a good review is about identifying a piece of art's place in time, its broader global social and political impact, and how well it conveys the artist or director's intent. And being able to review something in that lens requires a lot of research and multiple viewings of the film. But so many of the points being made to directly attack Saltburn can easily be countered with just basic cursory research into Emerald Fennell's intent for the movie. And in my research, I've noticed that a lot of arguments being made against the movie are very similar to each other, with a lot of the same exact points being made, with very little personal perspective or nuance being injected into it. Which is funny considering one of the most common arguments against Saltburn is that it's unoriginal. But it seems like this speaks to a broader issue today, where people tend to just go to comment sections to form their own opinions. There's this trend of people wanting to make sure their ideas and thoughts are validated before expressing them. And I think that comes down to a mindset of, how can I make something go viral, rather than how can I make something meaningful? However, does an artist's or director's intent with a piece of art even matter? Do you need to understand the artist's intent in order to critique their work? On one hand, when an artist or director puts their work into the world, it's really no longer theirs. It's up to the public to talk about it and to scrutinize it.
We have found the witch, may we burn, huh?
But on the other hand, I do believe that it matters, particularly if you're really trying to have a good understanding of the art, and especially if you want to form a well thought out critique and you're presenting yourself as an expert on the subject. So I just wanted to take this time to talk about the intention behind Saltburn without imposing upon it a bunch of concepts that the director didn't necessarily intend. Because while there is a lot of meaning in this film, sometimes the curtains are just blue. But I also want to talk about the visual language used to convey Emerald Fennell's vision, because this is a highly aesthetics-driven movie with intentional cinematography to properly convey her ideas. And I'm also going to talk about the costume design, because I love costume design, and how Saltburn relies on costume to tell its story. Then we're going to have some fun, and I'm going to identify every piece of clothing I could throughout the film for you, so you can go and buy the pieces if you want, and the links to those are in the description below. Saltburn is a film that very much prioritizes visual impact to tell its story. There isn't a lot of subtext or nuance, and what you see is essentially what you get. It's not a commentary on class dynamics or an eat the rich or eat the poor narrative. And I don't think there's a single instance of Emerald Fennell indicating that it is. And I've watched just about every single interview with her where she talks about her intention behind the film. Saltburn is not a very ambiguous film in its intentions. There is symbolism within the film, but overall, Saltburn is much baser than that, and it doesn't want you to overthink it. At its root, this movie is about the id, the great reservoir of libido, as Sigmund Freud put it. That primal sense of desire and impulsion, unconcerned with shame or consequence. It's about the monkey brain in all of us and proposing the question of what happened if we took the restraints off and let our monkey brains run free. And what better way to show shameless, unrestrained monkey brain than with beautiful, decadent people in a beautiful, decadent place. And all the temptation in the world to run wild with it in a kick-ass summer vacation. Emerald Fennell's intention was to display unrestrained desire through dark comedy, eroticism without crudeness, and aesthetic Gen Z millennial visuals. And as she so expertly puts it, this film is about our obsession with beauty, our kind of fetishization of stuff. The priceless, beautiful marble statues with silly hats put on them. It's the juxtaposition between the Saltburn estate and the debauchery that goes on inside of it. And something about Emerald Fennell that you should know is that she loves to put movies inside of her movies. Both literally, with Superbad and The Ring making an appearance, but also within the storytelling. Comparisons have obviously been made of Saltburn to Terrorama, The Go-Between, Rebecca, and The Talented Mr. Ripley, among many others. But that's exactly what Emerald Fennell was intending. She did state that The Talented Mr. Ripley wasn't a direct reference, and I'm inclined to believe her, but it probably was a subconscious reference, because she's been very open about all of her film and literary references in all of the interviews that she's conducted. She's not hiding anything. And in regards to people claiming Saltburn is derivative of Brideshead Revisited, there's a scene towards the beginning of the movie where Oliver tells Felix,
Sounds like an Evelyn Waugh novel.
You know, a lot of Waugh's characters are based on my family, actually. Yeah, I was completely obsessed with that house.
Evelyn Waugh is the author of Brideshead Revisited. She's giving you the marble bust, the English summer at the beautiful estate that's been told in many stories before, and putting that silly hat on top. Saltburn is very self-aware of its own literary and cinematic references. It's the classic high-low pairing, the $300 caviar served with ruffles and tater tots. And having Saltburn set in 2006 really allowed Emerald Fennell to drive home that point. The high-low pairing, the sheer silliness and bad taste of it all, especially when it comes to the costumes, because the fashion of 2006 was so
malignantly ugly.
With their denim skirts layered over the black leggings, the stacks of Livestrong bracelets, and the juicy couture tracksuits. This ugliness set against jaw-dropping beauty, the you're in or you're out attitude, and the black and white way of life for the Cattons was all very much intended by Emerald Fennell. The Cattons are rather mysterious and sometimes a bit rude, but honest when it comes down to it, which is such a stark contrast when compared to Oliver, who's not only an unreliable narrator, but a compulsive liar. From the beginning of the movie, he's lying to us by saying, I wasn't in love with Felix, whilst playing a romantic montage of Felix's neck and face. He's clearly in love with him. Emerald Fennell is telling us through the visuals that Oliver is a liar. But that's the thing with compulsive liars, it doesn't matter what they're lying about, they're gonna lie anyway. They'll lie about anything to anyone, including themselves, to paint themselves maybe in a better light, such as an evil mastermind Bond villain, which Oliver wasn't. He was just opportunistic. So we have this extreme dichotomy between Oliver and the Cattons, the beautiful, popular, rich Felix, and the not-so-beautiful, unpopular, and poor Oliver. But this dichotomy, this theme of extremes, was present in almost every other aspect of the film as well. I'm sure you noticed that Saltburn was shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio, something very uncommon today. And that was done intentionally because it draws the viewer into the intimacy of the scene. and highlights the hyperfixation that Oliver has for not only Felix, but the Catton family as a whole and the Saltburn estate, a visual representation of Oliver's tunnel vision, which was made very apparent for the first time in Felix's house tour, where instead of paying attention to the rich history and beautiful furniture within the estate, Oliver is completely fixated on how Felix walks through the halls of the estate, carefree and careless, gracefully gliding between each room. Oliver doesn't care about the estate in this moment. He's too mesmerized by Felix. His desire is showing. But this hyperfixation of Oliver is present with each character he turns his attention to. And in the scenes with Farley and Venetia, when his monkey brain fixates on them, despite being sensual, the scenes were never really sexual. There's no nudity in any erotic scene in Saltburn, and that was done very intentionally. Instead, cinematographer Linus Sandgren zoomed in on their faces, their necks, their skin, and the reactions to what Oliver is doing to them. And there's no indication that Oliver was ever even aroused during these scenes. For him, he used sexuality to manipulate and dominate the supporting characters, to hold power over Venetia and her eating habits, and to gain access to Farley's phone to frame him for stealing the Catton's property. The sensuality used by Oliver was always very self-serving. The only person who Oliver really wanted to be with and to love was Felix, but he was out of reach. The closest Oliver could get to intimacy with Felix was slurping up that bathtub G Fuel. But these intimate, erotic scenes were greatly benefited by the use of that 4:3 aspect ratio. One of the basic principles of photography is to fill the frame. And in most movies that come out today, the frame is often full of explosion and lights and everything to keep us entertained. The Subway Surfer under the actual video type of movies, you know? But in Saltburn, the focus is so often on a singular subject and lingering on that subject. Linus Sandgren and Emerald Fennell fill the frame completely with that subject by using the narrow, focused 4:3 aspect ratio, thus physically bringing you into the intimacy of the characters and the house, to make you feel like a voyeur, looking in on their private lives. And when that 4:3 ratio is coupled with the highly saturated colors used throughout the film, the rich, vibrant reds, greens, purples, and yellows, sun-kissed tan skin, overexposed whites, and crushing blacks. A color story very reminiscent of the years around when Saltburn takes place, when everyone started applying filters to their photos and suddenly everybody was a photographer. And that's really what Saltburn is doing here with its cinematography. Emerald Fennell gave the viewer not only a sense of intimacy and voyeurism, but also nostalgia. This film just oozes 2006. But what else can you do to make a movie set 18 years ago into a convincing period piece? Well, with amazing costumes. Costume is an incredibly important vehicle in Saltburn to delivering the impact of the story. Each character is styled very intentionally to reveal their motivations in the way they think about themselves. For Oliver, his costume and clothing really tell a visual story. At the beginning, when Oliver walks into Oxford for his first day of school in a brand new, stiff suit, we see his immediate realization that Oxford is not what he thought it would be. I think we've all had this preconceived notion that high society, the ultra smart or the ultra wealthy, all dress the part, especially at a place like Oxford. And Oliver was under the same impression. From the very start, Oliver doesn't belong there. And he's quickly called out on that fact by Farley, who funnily enough is the only character who consistently wears designer clothing for pretty much every single outfit. It takes one to know one. He's clearly trying very hard as well, but is much more skilled at it than Oliver is, and seems much more comfortable in his clothing, with a very defined and unique style consisting of cropped jackets and patterned jumpers with elongating, high-waisted pants that accentuate his height and sense of superiority. But after Oliver's called out by Farley, he makes a change to adapt to his surroundings, and we start to see the casualization of his wardrobe. In his first tutoring session, he's no longer wearing a suit, instead opting for a plaid button-down shirt. Do you know the difference between a button-up and a button-down shirt? No? Well, let me tell you. Button-up shirts are similar to button-down shirts, but they have no buttons at the collar, like you can see here. Button-down shirts, such as the one Oliver is wearing in this scene, have buttons on the collar to keep it in place. Button-down shirts are much more casual than button-up shirts. So this transformation in Oliver's wardrobe speaks to Oliver's attempt at a more relaxed look. So we can see that Oliver is making a conscious effort to fit in for the rest of his time at Oxford. We see him in the library here wearing this quarter-zip sweater. Oliver's still got a long way to go, but he's learning, which becomes quite apparent in this bar scene with his tucked-in plaid shirt and glasses hanging out of his shirt pocket. It's not exactly an endearing look, but it's his. But this moment for Oliver in the bar serves as his tipping point. When he has entered the life of Felix, he's joined the friend group and is now adapting to the casual, wealthy lifestyle that Felix is introducing him to. And throughout their subsequent friendship montage, and we all love a good montage, Oliver is now seen wearing t-shirts, he's showing off his big muscles, he lets his hair get messy, and he's even wearing zip hoodies to the library. Frankly, he's looking a bit American. But let's fast forward to when he gets to Saltburn. He arrives at the estate in his dressy casual outfit that we see him wear a lot, which is expected when arriving in a place like this. But it's still a very stiff look that is greatly contrasted by Felix's wrinkled shirt and lack of shoes, a carefree look for a carefree person, letting the dogs out, summer vacation mode. We then move to Oliver's room where Felix is telling him that they dress for dinner in black tie. So even though Felix kind of separates himself from the money and wealth of his family through his seemingly genuine kindness toward Oliver and his very casual and wrinkled fashion choices, he's still subject to the Saltburn black tie dinners and the lifestyle of the elite, which is just wild. Can you imagine putting a tux on every night to sit down and eat your 50-cent pack of ramen? The dry cleaning bill alone would be insane, which I guess is why you'd be eating the 50-cent ramen, which I do more than I care to admit. But anyway, after dinner, Oliver sees Venetia standing out in the yard in this very gothic, very eerie shot. And Oliver wants to plant his seeds early, spin his web across the family from the moment he set foot in Saltburn. So he goes outside, covered only by this Missoni blanket. It's strategy, because we see Oliver then shed his blanket to show Venetia his gains, the work he's been doing at the gym, and she approves. And at this point, Oliver's body is a part of his costume. It's a tool for his character to use to seduce Venetia and implant himself in her life. And the next time we see Oliver shed his clothing, this time for Farley, Felix, and Venetia all together, this is the symbolic, full integration into the Catton lifestyle. He's now a part of Saltburn, and he isn't going anywhere. Now let's fast forward through the manipulation of Venetia, the framing of Farley, and the reveal to Felix that Oliver has fabricated his entire life story. And we land at the Midsummer Night's Dream birthday party, where a lot of the symbolism through costume comes in, and when everything goes downhill for the Cattons. The first shot of the party being Venetia's Topshop dress. Then we see Elspeth representing Titania from A Midsummer Night's Dream, the Queen. And what is more befitting for a queen than this golden woodland appliqué Valentina Haute Couture Fall 2018 gown? For Oliver, at this party, his look was really to accentuate the woodland creature aspect of his personality. He's intended to represent a changeling, a mythological fairy who can shapeshift into a human with the intention of replacing human babies and delivering those babies to the devil. And this symbolism was represented with a custom white suit with oak leaf embroideries, inspired by motifs within the original Midsummer Night's Dream paintings. Oliver's costume was then finished with the antler headpiece, giving him a much more folk-like, mythical look. Now contrast that with Felix's costume for this party, which takes casual to another level. After the confrontation with Oliver about the truth of his family, Felix is really only there for appearances, and he's definitely not putting in any extra effort on Oliver's behalf. It's his house, his friends, another Saltburn summer party. So he's in blue jeans, a white tank top, and a pair of gold angel wings. And I really love the symbolism here with the golden wings as he stands against the Minotaur statue in the Saltburn labyrinth. As I'm sure most of us know, in Greek mythology, Icarus was given a set of wings and told not to fly too close to the sun, but he did anyway, his wings melted, and he fell to his death. The whole party is so expertly intertwined with mythology and Shakespeare and the subtext of each character's costumes. Even Farley, whose costume was very theatrical, very authentic, with a papier-mâché donkey mask. Perfect for him, because in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the character Bottom is transformed into a donkey for playing too many pranks. And Farley is also a mischievous trickster in Saltburn, always trying to mess with Oliver's life, from pressuring Oliver to buy 12 Jaeger bombs at the bar in the beginning, to telling Felix about Oliver and Venetia's midnight blood rituals. Farley is solidly the ass of the family, with the costume to go with it. But after the party, after the death of Felix, we come to the very controversial scene of the funeral and the grave. And a lot of people say that this is just Oliver being weird and this whole scene was put in for pure shock value. But I completely disagree, and I don't think any scene in this movie was particularly shocking or gross. I have seen The Human Centipede 1 and 2. In this scene, we see Oliver shed his costume, and I feel like this is one of 2 times in this movie where Oliver is honest with the viewers. Felix is now completely unreachable, physically and emotionally, and we know that Oliver is completely in love with Felix. But this scene is him trying to reach something that is now impossible to get. It's sad and a tragic realization of loss that if you've experienced before, I think you'll completely understand. And while we have the restraint to not defile a grave, this film is about the removal of those restraints, about the pure, visceral feelings of desire that most people consider intrusive thoughts and don't act on. And the only other time Oliver is honest with the audience is when he thinks we aren't watching. The final scene of the film, where he's dancing naked through the house, he's defiling Saltburn with his vulgarity, a victory dance that mirrors the house tour which Felix gave upon Oliver's initial arrival at the estate. This finale is a fun bookend to close the final chapter of the film, a bookend with a silly hat on top. And you might say he's also being honest when he's revealing his big master plan to Elspeth when she's sick in bed. But I think he's still lying. And he's not lying to her, because what she thinks doesn't matter at all. He's lying to himself. Just like he was telling his parents that he was top of his class at Oxford, Oliver thinks incredibly highly of himself and his intelligence. And I believe his confession to Elspeth was less of a confession and more so Oliver convincing himself of his own genius, that this was all planned out by him from the very beginning, when in reality, it was just a series of opportunistic actions with the initial intention of inserting himself into Felix's life, which kept escalating and escalating as he desired more and more from this family, ultimately culminating in the death of the Cattons and Oliver's ownership of the Saltburn estate, the final prize with no rhyme or reason behind his actions beyond pure, gluttonous desire. Alright, now let's speed run the outfits in this film. I went through and tried to identify every piece that I could that wasn't very obvious to identify, and I wasn't able to identify everything. I haven't memorized every garment in existence yet. All the links to the listings that I could find are in the description. I'm not affiliated with them whatsoever. I'm just trying to help you out if you're looking for a certain piece. Starting at the beginning, we have this character wearing a Superdry blue vintage cropped long sleeve rugby top. Next to her is Farley in a red studded trucker jacket with a contrasting white collar from the Spring/Summer 22 Ace of Spades collection from the brand Youths in Balaclava. And he's also wearing patterned high-waisted pull-on pants from the Spring 2022 menswear collection from Wales Bonner. In this scene, Felix is in a polo Ralph Lauren cotton v-neck sweater. That one was a bit obvious though. And here he is again in that white cable knit sleeveless cricket jumper with that red-green-red collar trim. This shirt of Felix's is a vintage Abercrombie oversized rugby polo in white, which you can get at ASOS. In the bar scene, Felix's What Happens in Cassiope Stays in Cassiope shirt you can probably just get if you take a vacation to Cassiope, Greece, or you can buy a replica off of Etsy. Felix's next item is a large chevron stripe polo from Gant, And the girl Felix was briefly seeing before he cast her aside was wearing a top from Jack Wills and a vintage belt from Miss 60, which I couldn't find an exact reference for, but I linked a similar one in blue. This cotton cashmere sleeveless jumper we see Farley wearing in multiple scenes is from Gucci. The blanket Oliver was wrapped in here in the scene with Venetia was from the Missoni Home Collection, which is still available at this time. It's the Montgomery chevron pattern throw. This top of Venetia's is the polo neck top in dark gray leopard print from H&M. And then we go back to Farley with another sleeveless jumper from Sasquatchfabrix Spring-Summer 2022 collection. The dress we see Venetia wearing in the Saltburn montage for 0.75 seconds is from the Fall 2007 ready-to-wear collection from Christopher Kane. Then we see her for another 0.75 seconds in this purple sequin jumpsuit that retails for $2,000 from Dundas. And here's Farley in a classic Dump Him tee that was first seen in 2002 on Britney Spears after dumping Justin Timberlake, and you can find replicas on Etsy. Now we scale things up with a beautiful metallic voile, off-the-shoulder column dress we see Elspeth in, which is from the Spring 22 collection from the designer Talbot Runoff. Then another beautiful piece of clothing, this time on Farley, the Morning Glory shirt from Bode. And here's Oliver in a sweaty tee and swim trunks from Fat Face. Then we go back to Farley in another piece from the Spring-Summer 2022 Ace of Spades collection from Youths in Balaclava once again. In this karaoke scene, we see Elspeth draped across the chaise lounge in a beautiful piece from none other than the Fall 2018 Haute Couture collection from Valentino. Maybe it's Maybelline, maybe it's Valentino Haute Couture. Then there's Venetia in Saint Laurent bedazzled sunglasses. And here she is again in a fuchsia corset bikini top from Lisa Marie Fernandez, a bikini set that retails for $455. This girl has expensive taste. Almost there. Okay, now here's Elspeth again in that very Midsummer Night's Dream gown from the Valentino Fall 2018 Haute Couture. But then we have a serious drop in price, that high-low pairing to this cardigan from Venetia, the Ani striped cardigan from Hush, which you can get for £60. And the first time Farley isn't wearing designer, it's a vintage 90s sweater in wool and acrylic from St. John's Knit, and I found one listing on Grailed for it, so good luck. And then finally, the moment you've all been waiting for, the one outfit everybody is trying to get, this custom one-of-one birthday suit by none other than Barry Keoghan. You can't get this thing anywhere, but you can rewind it as much as you want. But that's it, those are all the garments I was able to find. If you could find more, please feel free to put them in the comments and share, and I'll see you next time.